with Saviour. She is my guest this morning. We're talking about I suppose really it's people who should be heroes and are not necessarily heroes because they think it's not a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time it's because the peer pressure makes them think that they're not right. They don't actually believe in themselves.
So how can we force some? Well, you don't want to force people to do it, but you know, how do you get people to say, well, I must do something about this, even if it's something small?
Well, there are a few things that affect people. One, which is interesting, is the bigger the number of people that are standing around as bystanders, the less likely you are to personally take action, because your view is, well, everybody else hasn't done anything, so maybe I shouldn't either, which is a bit mad, isn't it? I've got a lovely story of a guy. It's a true story of a guy, an African American. His name's Wesley Autry, and he was in the underground, you know, in the subway in New York, and there was a man there who had a seizure, and in having the seizure, he fell onto the track. Now, this chap Wesley, he had his 2 small children with him. He handed them to a lady. He asked her to look after the children for a moment. He jumped onto the track, laid on top of the man and held him inside the rails while the train came in. And when the train arrived, there was only 11 centimetres between his head and the train. He shouted up from underneath the train, "It's okay," to the lady, "I'm all right," so that the children knew he was okay. So he had that presence of mind. And he effectively saved that man's life, no question. What's interesting about that is there were 75 people on that platform, and only one person took action. But what isn't surprising is that he was an African American, because African Americans are 8 times more likely to be heroes. Isn't that interesting?
It's odd,
so
isn't it?
black men are 8 times more likely to be heroes. And we don't really know quite why, but that is...
It's obviously in the genetic makeup.
It could be cultural. We don't have enough information to know, but we do know that that is the case. It could be opportunity. There's lots of possibilities there. But one thing that is clear is that when you're in a crowd and you see something that isn't right, don't assume because nobody else is taking action that you shouldn't. I mean, Kitty Genovese is a good example. She was stabbed to death just outside some flats where she lived, and nobody did anything about it because they could hear her screaming, but everybody presumably thought somebody else was going to dial 901, you know, the American emergency services. And that's the problem. It's this business of, well, somebody else will do it. And you have to bear in mind, actually, I have to take responsibility. I'm alive in this world, so I have to be the one that takes steps. And if the emergency services get 3 phone calls rather than 1, that's better than no phone calls at all.
Yeah, it's true, yes.
So it's taking that view to start with. Just because I'm in a crowd doesn't mean that I'm wrong not to take action. You know, I should take action, and I can take action. So that's...
I was thinking in that situation, the more people that ring up, the more serious they take the problem.
Probably true. But you know, in that awful football fire, where I can't remember the stadium now, where there was a huge fire in an awful...
Bradford.
Bradford, thank you. Nobody dialed 999. It was quite a long time into that fire really taking hold because everybody thought
that somebody
else must have done it. Isn't that unbelievable? A massive big event like that, and there was no 999 call put in.
Is it partly because we are now used to so many people in yellow jackets, put a yellow jacket on them, they're in charge?
Well, actually,
in actual fact, they're no more in charge than anybody else. We're just frightened that we're told what to do by people. Therefore, it's their responsibility. Because whatever we do in life, I find it when people come around our house, they come around with their kids. The moment they come in our house, their kids are our responsibility. They just give the responsibility over to somebody else. And when we're in a crowd, do we do that?
Well, it's interesting you say that because the yellow jacket syndrome or the white coat syndrome or whatever you want to call it, if somebody assumes a level of responsibility, we tend to do what they tell us. So if somebody walked up to you in the street and they had a yellow jacket on, they said, "Excuse me, don't step on the pavement now, please," you probably wouldn't, because you're kind of programmed to respect authority figures and to think, oh, I better not then. And it may be a little bit later you think, who was that? Were they a policeman? What business did they have telling me? But that's what we tend to do. And that's been proven to horrendous effect, where people in experiments have been giving electric shocks, or believing they weren't really, to people because they were told to do so by somebody wearing a white coat.
Because you see it on The Real Hustle on television, where people pull off scams because they put a yellow jacket on.
Yeah. Exactly.
We really are strange. How can we? Perhaps we can't do it to ourselves, but how can we instill this in our kids?
Well,
Because it's a right and wrong thing, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it's important to get children to really identify an empathy with people, particularly in bullying in schools. The children can start to recognise and understand what it feels like to be on the other end of the situation, you know, as being bullied. That helps. It also helps them to get greater awareness, you know, to start recognising what is going on in this social group, what is actually happening, and to become more aware. And another thing is to help children to understand how to take action, because they don't know what to do, and it's difficult in a situation like that. And furthermore, the whole environment is all about fitting in. So school is very much about fitting in. If you don't fit in, that often makes you somebody who's likely to be a target. And I'm not going to say a victim of bullying, because bullying is about targeting someone. The people that are targeted are not necessarily victims, because that makes them sound weak. They're often just targets. And it can be people that have an emotional effect on the person who's bullying them, so they look at them and they see them as a threat, for example, not in an obvious way. So with children, the thing to do is to help them to know how to take action, to make them more aware, to make sure that they are able to empathise, and to really get a sense of what an everyday hero means, because we look up to pop stars, and well, children tend to. I don't do that quite so much now.
No. You
but
take the pictures down off the wall.
Only a little bit. But we tend to look up to these people and not recognise actually the true heroes in our midst are the quiet people who get on and do it. And some of those heroes are the people who just go out of the house every day, who happen to suffer huge anxiety, but manage to get out the door and go down the road and do their shopping or whatever anyway. And that is a form of heroism too, overcoming your own personal difficulties.
Now, I came under grief the other day from a lady who emailed in because she said I was being biased and everything else. What it was following, Clark Carlisle did a programme on BBC4 about racism in football. And all I said was that football team supporters, in their way, and the football players are tribal, in as much as they hate the other team. Not because they don't know them, they haven't got a clue who they are, but they're all together to fight the other side and to win. And she said that sport's not like that, and I believe to a degree it is, and that's what makes people want to win.
Well, I think, John, what you're describing is exactly the situation that we've been talking about, which is when you're in a group, you want to belong, or I should say fit in, because belonging's slightly different. You want to fit in with a group, and if you are amongst football supporters and you are supporting that team, that is where you want to fit in. You want to be a part of that. So that's why you get these massive behaviours within groups, that they all behave in the same way, and it can sometimes be absolutely appalling. And yet, when they're at work the next day,
they're
they
different people.
dream
No.
of behaving in that way.
It's really strange, isn't it?
It's very much a matter of wanting to be part of the social norms, and the way that people behave normally when you're part of that group is how you behave. Otherwise, you don't fit in with them. But what I want to try and promote is that fitting in is not helping you to become an authentic human being. Belonging is what makes you an authentic human being, and you can't belong without actually having some acceptance of who you are, what you believe in, what you know to be right, and accepting that, and then you end up belonging, because you have a sense of belonging. But when you try to fit in, you actually have to push away all of that authenticity to become something you're not. So what I want to promote is authenticity.
Be yourself.
Be yourself. Learn to be yourself.
Where can we find out more information about this sort of thing?
Well,
I suppose you've got a website.
do you know, funnily enough, on the 13th of October, I have part 2 of my How to Be Brilliant, Gorgeous, Talented and Fabulous. Now, you don't have to have been to part 1 because it stands alone completely, but we're looking at how you can get rid of your limiting beliefs and how you can really become the person that you want to be. So it's free. It's at Uckfield Civic Centre. It's on the 13th of October. And if you go to my website, or you just put Maria Paviour, Paviour spelt like saviour, but with a P, as you well know, John. If you put Maria Paviour into Google and you put Eventbrite or How to Be Brilliant, Gorgeous or something like that, it'll come up with my little Eventbrite website. You can go there and you can book a free ticket for you and your friends.
Absolutely free.
Absolutely free. Saturday morning, good way to spend a Saturday morning becoming free of all your past limiting beliefs.
Maria, thank you for joining us this morning.
You're very welcome.
Maria Paviour is my guest this morning. It's Uckfield FM.